If you can step away from the noise, kill the lights, and put your headphones on, you'll be doing yourself a huge favor. Let's go. Back in late 2023, I began seeing a man in my neighborhood walking his dog. I would see him in the morning when I went to work, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. He was an average-looking guy, maybe in his 60s. I would see him again regularly when I came home. Since I worked an 8 to 5 job, I didn't think much of it. I just assumed we had similar schedules. He always wore the same blue jacket. I didn't dwell on it because it looked like a rain or windbreaker, so I thought it was just what he threw on to walk the dog. He would stare a lot when he walked by, but again, I assumed maybe he was just a lonely guy and let it go. One day, I asked him if he had received the end-of-year letter from the HOA, and he seemed confused. I repeated myself, and he said he hadn't received anything yet. I wrote this off as well because I assumed he was caught off guard. I had been seeing him daily for months, but we never spoke. He genuinely seemed shocked that I was speaking to him. I told him to keep a lookout for it, and he just stared before going back to walking his golden retriever. I began seeing him even more after this. By Christmas, I was seeing him at least once a day, if not twice. I treated him like every other neighbor and gave a quick wave when I saw him walking his dog. In March, I separated from my husband. He moved out and took the dog. He owned him before I came along, so I understood. Since I was now alone and sad, my mom stayed with me for a while. She wasn't working at the time, so she would be at my house during the day while I was gone. She noted the same guy always walking by. She noticed he always stared too, and that it was kind of odd. She waved hello to him a few times, but he never did anything but stare and walk his dog. She said that since he walked the dog often, but seemingly on a schedule, he could have early onset dementia. Or maybe he was sick somehow and using the dog walks as a way to get exercise. We agreed he was very odd, but harmless. After a month or so, my mom went back to her house and I was living alone. One thing I loved about that house was the fact that the backyard abutted a national park. Beyond my fence were trees and forest. After my husband and dog left, I would sit in the backyard and hear what sounded like footsteps. It was almost always late at night when I'd be sneaking out for a cigarette before bed. I was drinking a good amount at the time, so I figured 1, I was paranoid, 2, I was probably hearing raccoons or possums in the woods, or 3, having the dog before would have scared off any critters. It didn't happen every night, just far enough apart that I was able to dismiss it. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My fence had horizontal planks rather than the standard vertical style. There were gaps you could see through if you were right up on it. I looked over the fence in the daylight for a sign of anyone back there. The national forest kept a fire break clear between the edge of the park and the back of the homeowner's properties, so it was difficult to tell if anyone had been there or not. However, I started noticing lighters and cigarettes missing from the backyard. I would swear I had an almost full pack going to bed, but when I checked the next day, it would be half empty. I wrote this all off due to my heavy drinking. My cousins started coming over on the weekends to help me do some handiwork around the house. The neighbor in the blue coat would still walk his dog every day. He would now stop and watch my cousins from the sidewalk as they worked. He would let the leash out for the dog to come up to them, but they didn't pet it because it smelled awful. I told them the theory my mom had, that he was sick, weird, and harmless. They didn't agree. The next time he let the dog into the driveway, my cousins told him to fuck off. From what they told me, he just stared at them for a while and then walked away. From then on, the man would still stare, but it was even creepier. When I drove by, he would stop and watch me, physically turning his body to follow my car as I passed. I would wave as if it were any other neighbor, as I always did, and he wouldn't flinch. Around June, a friend of mine moved in. She was going through a divorce as well, and I was happy to have someone to hang out with after work. We had a lot of fun drinking and burning fires in the fire pit. Then it began again, the sound of footsteps in the woods. Since we were both drunk, we ran inside and laughed it off. This happened a handful of times over the next few months. I would hear things more often when I was alone, as my roommate split her time and was never with me on the weekends. She had also noted the creepy guy with his dog. He seemed to be walking his dog when I left for work, around 7:30, and again when she was leaving for work, around 8:30. He would let his dog out to her daily, and she would pet the dog at first. She stopped because the dog smelled so bad, and the man never spoke. He just stared. She started getting creeped out too. She said he seemed friendly enough until she stopped petting his dog, at which point his stares shifted to being mean. He began stopping to watch her drive by as well. Then one day, I saw it. I saw him down past the entrance of the neighborhood, at the tree line to the forest. He was clearly walking into the woods. That's when it clicked. Why he wore the same clothes every day. Why he seemed to be there with his dog every day we left the house. Why they smelled so bad. Why I was hearing things in the woods. I almost began to panic. Surely a man isn't living in the woods watching me? Surely this man hasn't been watching me through my fence for almost a year. The whole time this was happening, the house next door was empty. It was a rental. The previous tenants had left, and it just sat there. I started thinking back and realized I began seeing the man sometime after the previous tenants moved out. I tried my best not to panic and started looking into trail cameras to film behind my fence. I told my roommate about my theory, and she said I sounded crazy at first. She jokingly started yelling out for him to go away and leave us alone. Then we literally started hearing footsteps in the woods at that moment and ran inside. Before I could even order a camera, they rented the house next door. It was just days after I told my roommate what I thought was going on. A family with a dog and 2 kids moved in. The last time I saw the man walking his dog was the morning the family moved in, because I came home from work to see the moving truck. When I introduced myself to the new neighbors, I asked about the woods behind the house. They didn't have a fence. I asked if they found anything back there, and they said they did, but it was just random junk they threw out. I didn't say anything more. I contemplated telling them, but figured I would sound insane. I believed this man was living behind their house and watching me through my fence. I never had cameras in the backyard, so I can't say for certain if he ever crossed the fence. Since I never saw him again, I decided his cover was blown and he moved on to watch other people. I stayed in that home until October 2025. Literally never saw the guy ever again after that day.